Thank you for listening to the Awakened Radio Network at awakenedradio.net, where we invite you to join us for the Prosperity Game. You can win prizes. You can also discover the easy, quick, surefire ways to allow prosperity into your life experience. The Prosperity Games are ongoing on the Awakened Radio Network. Check out our front page, awakenedradio.net, for details on the Prosperity Game. You can win prizes by calling in, by being in our chat room. You can even win by leaving comments in our forum. We've got all manner of ways for you to join us to play the Prosperity Game, where we all win and live beautiful, wonderful, on-purpose lives. Join us for the Prosperity Games at awakenedradio.net.
Welcome to Simply Conversations. This show airs every Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central, 7 Mountain, and 6 Pacific. Each week we'll have a new conversation exploring the life of a person who began to listen to his or her heart. Join us as we open the door for these uplifting and courageous people. Whether they are young, old, or somewhere in between, their work has helped to transform their lives and ultimately helps to support, heal, and grow their communities. Listen to our discussion and be inspired as you hear about life-changing and transforming stories. Be part of our conversation. Feel free to take part in our chat room or on the phone. Ask questions and chat with our guests. This show is brought to you by simplyconversations.com. Welcome to Simply Conversations. I'm Rob Ragozzine. Thanks for joining us. It's 9 p.m. Eastern, September 29th. This show's all about how our guests began to utilize inner guidance from their hearts. And you have the opportunity in the first half hour to listen to them in their story and then participate with questions and comments in the second half hour. Please join us in the chat room at awakenedradio.net and click on the live chat tab, or add Awakened Radio to Skype and dial 334-649-7204. This week we have Ken Jaques come gather with us in our conversation as we open the door for Ken. He has a deep interest in bringing health back into healthcare. He says, I believe real transformation will happen when we start getting like-minded citizens together in a much more community-focused, big-picture approach. And if you're inspired by tonight's talk and like to talk yourself, come contact me on Facebook or Twitter or on Simply Conversations and participate on a call of your own. We'd like to hear about how you healed and changed your community, and please feel free to do so. Welcome, Ken. Thanks for joining us tonight. I know it takes a lot of courage to come on the radio, and I want to thank you for that. How are you tonight?
I'm outstanding, Rob. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Now, you had mentioned that if you change yourself, you change the world on your blog, and I believe in your comments to me. So, can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, there's some of the phrases that we're all connected, and what we're putting out there is really what we attract back. And if we're walking around in a sort of down in the dumps and not feeling all that good about ourselves and so on and so forth, then I think we tend to attract that, and we tend to keep putting that out there in the world. And if we do that simple shift to say, I really don't have to go that way, I can be a much more positive person, I can still have my negative thoughts, but if I start to change the way I look at things and the way I look at myself and treat myself and respect myself and so on and so forth, then that change in myself is going to make a big change in whoever I deal with, and so on and so forth.
That's great. We've been talking about that tonight with our open house, and everyone has their own flavor of spin on that, but it's basically being you and stepping away from your fear and your doubts and just trying to do it, whatever it is for you, and you're doing it without actually knowing how anything's going to look.
Exactly. Very true.
Now, you're really trying to look at understanding, I guess, the root cause of illness and disease, and we have more power and understanding than we realize.
Yeah, and it's funny when I think we're taught almost from a very young age, if something happens, we go to the doctor, we ask the doctor, what is it? We think our doctor knows everything. We want a response right away because we just don't want to have that feeling any longer, and we're just, essentially, we're taught this, that he's going to have an answer for us or she's going to have an answer for us right away. 9 times out of 10, they recommend some sort of prescription. We come away, we take the prescription, and we say, oh, isn't that great? Everything's absolutely wonderful. And it's my belief that if we keep doing that, really all we're doing is patching symptoms. We're not figuring out the root cause of what is contributing to our illness or our discomfort or our disease in the first place. And yet we know an awful lot of things that contribute. We know a lot about diet. We know a lot about exercise. We know a lot about stressors. We know a lot about just always being in a state of unhappiness. All of these things contribute to illness and disease. And simply patching the symptoms, I think that's what we've been doing with the Western medicine system for the last however many years, 50 or 100 years. And I think the more we step back, take the time to look at root cause, the more we'll start to figure out what's really causing any challenges that we have in the first place. And I think we can take a more holistic approach to solving what those problems are.
Now, for yourself, on your site, you mentioned you got diagnosed with arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, and then you were kind of lost in what to do next. Now, you've mentioned the food, but you also must spend time in meditation and yoga and things of that nature?
Absolutely. I spend a lot of time. What's funny with rheumatoid arthritis, for any of your listeners that have had it or some of these diseases, they can be a bit debilitating at times, and it's quite painful at times. Other times it's not so bad, and with rheumatoid it tends to move around as well. So I have found exercise itself to be a little bit more difficult, but that doesn't mean I don't do it. I find a way. Maybe it's just a little walk, maybe it's just whether it's lifting a little bit of light weights. I'd like to do a little bit more of that. So that's one of the things that I take on. Meditation, and meditation is such a broad subject. I've spent a lot of time looking at meditation, and I think it's a lot like other things. You can spend so much time trying to figure out the right way to do it, and my belief is there's no real right way. It's just taking the time to pause, and there's many different types of meditations and mindfulness for you to do. And if you just do that, then you tend to relax your body, and you get it back into a state where it can start to do what it does best, to start working on healing itself and so on and so forth. I also find that for me, I do a fair bit of writing, and sometimes I call it automatic writing, where I'll just ask myself a question and then I'll just write. But in that moment, while I'm doing that, I'm totally in touch with myself. I'm not looking for answers anywhere other than whatever crazy thoughts come to mind, and I write them down, and I've just found that I've been able to come up with an awful lot of answers of what works for me. Not necessarily what works for somebody else, but what works for me. So those are some of the exercises that I spend a fair bit of time, and the writing is probably the one I do the most. That's sort of maybe not so much a meditation as it is a mindfulness, but that's what I do to get in touch with myself, if you will.
Well, that's what I talk about on my other show, is about connecting in to your intuition, and writing is definitely one way to do that, to begin listening to your heart, and writing definitely helps to get out the train of thoughts that you might think about but dismiss as being irrelevant. So you're really trying to connect inward and find what's inside, find yourself.
Yeah, and the irony with a lot of those is you get to the end and you look and it's like, where the heck did that come from? I didn't even know I had that thought. And to me, that's the real power of what I call automatic writing. There's no judgment. I just write whatever comes to mind, and when my body says stop, that's when I stop, and only then do I go back and read it. It's very powerful.
And then you go back and it looks like you almost didn't write it.
Exactly. Who was that?
Who was that? And you mentioned your crazy thoughts, and I was looking at some of the comments you had sent me. You said, if I have a crazy thought, I share it. If it feels right, I do it. I don't get attached to the outcomes, but stay open for the signs to see where my path is going. So truly connected to the world around you, and not dismissing it.
And it's funny because I quite intentionally use that phrase because I think a number of us do walk around thinking, oh, I better not say that. That's just crazy. Oh, it's crazy that I'm thinking that. And yet what I have found is whenever I just let those thoughts come out, whoever I'm talking to, they might look at me and say, what'd you just say? Holy hell, you're the second person to say that this week, or the third person to say that. I don't even know what it means, but I have on my spiritual side of me that I've learned a lot about as I've gone through this disease diagnosis. I'm just not afraid to share those thoughts because it may be something for me, or it may be that the other person needs to hear it. So I just let it fly. Sometimes people probably do think I'm crazy, but I just let it fly, whatever comes to mind.
Now, let's talk about how you're trying to shift our belief systems around health and really begin to make some bigger changes for overall well-being for everyone.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think I've shared with you, Rob, in some of my writings, I have this idea that it's by pulling a community together, by getting people to, there are so many people that are having these conversations that are saying there's so much more to healing and to health than the take the pill as the first approach. And I do want to do one quick clarification. I'm not sitting here bashing pills or bashing medication. That's not my message. My message is that if we look to medication to solve the problem and then we do nothing else to figure out what the root cause is, that's when I think we're missing the boat on finding solutions. When I've been in some of my pain situations, there's nobody would have told me not to take the medication. I needed it for pain relief or whatever the case may be. But as we start to look deeper and we seek help, and our doctors don't just automatically give us the first pill, or our doctors say, well, there's about 15 things that can contribute to illness and disease. Why don't you take some time and write down your diary over the next little while and start to figure out what makes sense for you? Is there stress at work? Is there stress in your relationship? Or are you just always on the go and you're never taking time to be with yourself? Are you constantly beating yourself up, thinking you're not worthy? What are some of the things that are going on? And to me, if we're getting out in sessions, whatever the case may be, and letting people hear that, wow, there's so much of us that a lot of us have the same thoughts and beliefs and we're going down the same path, but a subtle shift at starting to look at, wow, I might know what the root cause might be and I might be able to get a little bit better. Well, all of a sudden there's a lot less people in the system, and as a side effect, and I like to say it that way, the side effect is that there's a lot less people in the healthcare system and there's a lot less cost, and the system itself becomes much more sustainable. It's all about awakening to remember our body's own abilities to heal and to find ways to get ourselves into a situation where we can let our bodies do what they do best.
So not only tending to your body, but tending to the needs of your heart and your soul, and really finding ways to do that.
Exactly. And the thing is, what's funny, that the people I've had conversations with, almost nobody has come back and said that they do it the exact same way. Those who have found ways to start to look inside, they've done their own research, they've figured out what works best for them. And I love talking to people and say, have you tried this, have you tried this? And they do the same for me. But the point really is we find out what works best for us. And the side effect for me is I've started to understand myself a bit better. I appreciate myself a lot more than I have ever. I've been pretty hard on myself growing up, and you start to find out, wow, there's not that bad of a person inside there when you start to look in a little bit closer. So very much the mind, the body, the soul, the whole bit, the whole connection. And the more you get connected, then you start to find some good results.
Right. But that really means really spending time valuing yourself and doing something to connect inward, whether that's art. I like the creativity aspect of that for myself, but it could be welding for someone or almost anything.
Absolutely. I find that one of the things that I say to people, one of the best things we can do to heal, you mentioned things like meditation or whatever the case may be. If there's something that you're passionate about that you always wished you could do, it doesn't mean you turn that into a career overnight. Maybe it's picking up a guitar or a saxophone, or maybe it's singing a song that you never thought you could sing, or knitting or needlepoint. It doesn't matter. There's something you've had a passion for. When you start doing that, talk about being in the moment. You have absolutely there's no other cares in the world. You're just enjoying yourself, and that following your passion and whatever that means to you, to me, is so incredibly powerful.
Now, what are some of your ways that you like to do that? And keep in mind, of course, like you said, it's not necessarily, I guess, a job, but it could be an avocation or something that you just do as a hobby or just do to stress release.
Yeah, and it's a good question, because I sometimes, I'm here, I'm on your show, and I'm going through a lot of the same thing that I'm sure a lot of your listeners are. So there's days that I push myself so hard to solve my career, what am I supposed to be doing, I should be more successful, and so on and so forth. And some days I still go down that path of being a bit hard on myself, and then I just step back and maybe I write a little bit more, or maybe I go and I say, maybe I'm supposed to be talking to this person or this person or this person. And I've been spending a lot of time with community leaders in my community to say, there's just so much we can do, not only in the health, but you start tying that into mental health, you start tying that into other areas. And that very much is my passion, is to try to get us to wake up just a bit and get people thinking differently and get people out of the healthcare system. I have been known to play a few trivia games and video games and stuff like that during the day if that's what I need to take a break and get my mind off things. Meditation you've mentioned, going for a walk, curling, baseball. I do try to make sure there's enough time for me, as well as enough time for family and enough time for career, and try to find that balance as I go forward.
I was reading an article on Mind Body Green about functional medicine doctors who really help you to get to the root cause of the illness. Is that something that you've been using?
I have done a very little bit with functional, and it's funny. I've been to a lot of different types of practitioners, and I think the more I work down this path, I'm trying to find the balance between how much of this am I, what's the words I'm looking for? Am I out of balance in my own mind-body-spirit connection, and how much of that do I need to work on, versus how much do I need help from extra people? So I don't know if it'd be called functional medicine. A friend of mine just talked to me about Bowen therapy, which is I don't think it's new, but it's newish to me. I haven't done that. I've done things like acupuncture. I have done some of the naturopathic work. And I think it's important for people, as people are trying to heal themselves, I think it's important to understand you're going to do your best effort to help heal yourself, but almost surely you're going to need help. And depending on you as a person, that may come from your doctor, it may come from your rheumatologist, it may be your naturopath, but somebody's going to resonate with you a lot better than the others as to what works best for you. And I just encourage people to stick with that. And you might still look for other help in other places. So those are the areas I've done. Functional medicine is something I know a little bit about, but it's not something that I have spent a lot of time investigating. A lot with diet, though. We talked about that in the. I read Wheat Belly, William Davis's book, probably about 3.5 months ago, and I didn't read it from a weight loss perspective or anything like that. I read it from a health perspective and how changing my diet. I've talked to a number of people that have totally healed from either diabetes or thyroid conditions or MS, and a lot of them have done it by changing their diet quite radically. So I've gone down that path of looking. I tend to go primarily vegetables first on every meal. I do still have my red meats and my chicken and things like that, and I'll even have a glass of wine with dinner. But I've done a big change in trying to stay away from the genetically modified foods as much as I can, the high sugar foods as much as I can. So I certainly do my grocery shopping on the outsides of the grocery store and not down the middle aisles where all the processed food is.
Well, that's a wonderful step that a lot of people can take, but many people are confused by the different diets and which one is right for them and wrong, and I think it's really what helps you to feel the best. And as you mentioned, the Wheat Belly book, and there's the paleo people and the raw food people, so it's how do I feel the best? Do I feel good eating raw food all the time, or do I want something warm on occasion?
Exactly. And the irony I like to preach, I kind of have what I call my own manifesto, and the last thing I say is to stop worrying about all this stuff. If I've done my best, if you were in high school and you got like a 78 out of 100, you were pretty proud of yourself. If you come home and your diet is a 99 out of 100, a lot of people find a way to beat themselves up for missing that one thing or for having that thing of ice cream or whatever it was that they know they shouldn't have done. To me, sort of the punchline in a lot of this is do your best, make an improvement, and then leave yourself alone. Just stop, being so hard on yourself, and you'll start to notice change just by not being so hard on yourself. I think a lot of people will start noticing a lot of change as well, because you go to a diet perspective, and most diets you lose the weight and then you put on extra the next time, and then you go through it again and you put on extra. To me it's far more about accepting what you're eating and being happy with yourself for what you're doing, as opposed to feeling you have to be perfect with it.
Just noticing how you feel and going with that.
Exactly.
And kind of that relates to what you were talking about, how you have to really own up to what's going on for yourself, to own your own stuff. You say it a little more dramatically, but we're family friendly here. So own your own stuff, own your shadow, and to really recognize when you're in that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same with your feelings, and to me the two biggest things there are our diet and whether we're hard on ourselves. My disease is called, my diagnosis, I like to say, it is an autoimmune disease, and there's a number of scientists that are doing work that are talking about they can't quite explain it yet, but the connection between people who have had some sort of childhood trauma, whatever the case may be, and it doesn't even have to be that severe a trauma, but they've gone through the last 25 years in some form of beating themselves up emotionally. They're not good enough. They're not quite perfect. Oh, I'm a little bit crazy. I'm a little bit this. And eventually that starts to show in the physical body. And Dr. I'm going to forget his name. He's a Toronto doctor that'll come to me in a second. He's done a lot of work on this, and when I read that, it's like, wow, that just makes an awful lot of sense, that if we're emotionally beating ourselves up for a long time, eventually it is going to show up in the physical body. And Dr. Gabor Mate is the fellow that I'm thinking of. So to me, I've chosen to believe that to be true. Anything that I talk about and a lot of other people talk about, I encourage your readers. Everything we have is a belief. I don't really think there's very many things that are actually facts. And we just have to sort of test some of those beliefs and see which works for us. So the fact that I believe that I have to stop emotionally beating myself up and that my physical will get better, that's where I am, and that's working for me. And I hope that helps other people, but everybody has to kind of come to their own assessment on some of these things.
Now we have a short time before break, so would you like to share your contact information so that people can know how to contact you?
Sure. And I'll correct you on the name. The last name is Jaques. A lot of people put a C in that because they think it must be French, but it's my email address is ken@kenjaques.com. And so that's KenJaques.com. My website is www.kenjaques.com. And I think all of the rest of the information on there is it's on my website. And on that website, I blog. I'm been a pretty regular weekly blogger. I talk a lot about understanding root causes and helping people try to figure out how they can start looking inside to figure out what might be their own root causes. But I'd like to have fun on there too. I might do a gratitude post or here's 10 funny things that you don't know about me or something like that, because if we can give people a good laugh every now and then that's one of the best healing things that we have as well. So I've got product offerings up there as well. You take the time to look around and you can, I'm a pretty open book. You can figure out what I'm all about pretty quickly.
And you're on Facebook and Twitter as well?
Yeah. Yes, on Facebook at, what is it? It's Enlighten, Empower, Change. And it's /KenJaques23. Will take you to Enlighten, Empower, Change, and the Twitter handle is @Ken Jaques with no underscores or anything. It's just KenJaques.
Okay. I looked up the pronunciation of your name on Google, and they were way off.
I get way worse than that, Rob. Trust me.
So if there was anything that people could start today to begin to make some important changes in their health, what do you think that should be?
It's a great question, and I've answered that. It's almost so. If you're in some sort of a health condition, to me, it's all starts with asking yourself a question. So if I ever talk to anybody that's been diagnosed with a condition and they've been told that it will be there forever, I just say stop and ask yourself, does it have to be forever? And even if that's not the case, just what are some of the beliefs? Do I really have to? Am I living my best life now? And what are subtle changes that I could make? And I know we all kind of go through this in some ways. A lot of us wait for an ailment to come. But if you're constantly feeling stress or a headache or this or that, just pause and ask yourself, does it really have to be this way? Am I really taking the time to respect myself and accept myself for who I am? And if not, then what would I do differently? And you'll find that you'll know a lot of the answers yourself.
That's a great answer, because often we're denying ourselves the answers. We're not doing the things that help us to feel better, like the artwork or the creativity or the meditation or just going outside and walking or sitting in the sun.
Exactly. And even the suppression, I kind of have this, don't suppress things. People will talk about having a positive attitude, and I agree, but you know what, if somebody ticks you off, there's a way to tell them that they ticked you off. Even it's as simply as, I've shared with my wife at one point, I said, my first thought is anger. I didn't scream. I didn't do anything. And she said, well, I don't understand why you're angry. I said, well, here's how I interpreted that. And I was like, oh, I get it. But the point is, I didn't suppress the anger, and we came to a far better solution by actually standing up and saying, I don't like how that sounded. So to me, there's always a way to do that, but if you suppress the thought, you'll never have the conversation, and you'll start going down a path of forming perceptions or whatever the case may be, and it never needed to be that way. So be strong, be bold, be authentic, be vulnerable. Let yourself be you.
Okay.
Unapologetically.
We have break time, so we'll continue talking about this.
Come and join our love, it's so right if you could feel what we feel now.
Welcome to Awakened Radio Network. We cover the airwaves and cover the world with messages that inspire, inform, and motivate you, the listeners. I invite you to visit our website at awakenedradio.net and check out the Awakened store, where you will find stones and crystals, healing kits, smudge kits, Native American-style dream catchers, gemstone jewelry, hair feathers, books, tools that will help you bring about the changes in your life that you are desiring to experience. Visit us at awakenedradio.net/awakened store. Be sure and read all the information on the store page, because we're prone to having a lot of different kinds of sales. Every month there's something new to say thank you for supporting the Awakened Radio Network. The Awakened Radio store at awakenedradio.net is your one-stop shopping center for your metaphysical needs. Thank you so much for taking part and supporting the Awakened Radio Network. All the hosts really do appreciate you being part of creating this wonderful foundation for change that is reaching the world. Thank you. Peace.
Welcome to Simply Conversations. This show airs every Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central, 7 Mountain, and 6 Pacific. Each week we'll have a new conversation exploring the life of a person who began to listen to his or her heart. Join us as we open the door for these uplifting and courageous people. Whether they are young, old, or somewhere in between, their work has helped to transform their lives, and it ultimately helps to support, heal, and grow their communities. Listen to our discussion and be inspired as you hear about life-changing and transforming stories. Be part of our conversation. Feel free to take part in our chat room or on the phone. Ask questions and chat with our guests. This show is brought to you by simplyconversations.com. And we're back with Ken Jaques. And if you have a question for Ken, you can join us on air by adding Awakened Radio to Skype or calling 334-649-7204. Or you can join us in the chat room by coming to awakenedradio.net and clicking on the live chat tab and ask your question in the chat room. And we're back now with Ken. Ken's talking about really bringing awareness to your own healing so that we can better manage ourselves and help to heal the health industry as a whole. Now, Ken, can you talk to us a little bit about being an empowered patient?
Absolutely. I wrote a blog about that probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And an empowered patient, there's so much of it that's very simple. It really is taking the time to figure out what are the potential things that could be causing stresses in your life. When you go into the doctor, you don't just go in and say, this hurts. And he says, oh, I think that's this. Well, you have questions. You have the ability to ask, oh, that doesn't quite work for me. And if you don't find that you're clicking with that doctor, I understand this may not be as easy as I make it sound, depending on the community and so on and so forth, but you can find another doctor, or you can find an alternate care practitioner, or you can find a massage therapist, or something else. It is your body. I have a phrase, you are the captain and commander of your healthcare team. So anything doesn't quite feel right, Rob, you talk about the heart and so on and so forth. If your doctor says something and it feels like you just took a kick in the gut or a slap to the side of the head and it just didn't feel right, wake up, empower yourself, ask yourself the question. And I kind of have a story to go with that. When I was first diagnosed, I looked at my rheumatologist. I looked her right straight in the eye and I said, does diet have anything to do with this? And she looked right back at me and she said, no. And I can't even describe the feeling I had in the center of my stomach. I was not on a journey at all. I was not really listening to my body, but it just felt like, ooh, that didn't feel right. And now, about 5 years later, I've started to ask a lot of questions, and so many people have healed from changing diet, and it's like, they just don't know. They don't always know the answers. They know their own specialty areas, but there's a lot they don't know. And you know your own body better than they do. They know the physical body. So if you take the time to pause and understand that, then you'll start to ask a whole different set of questions, and you'll start to realize that you've got a lot more input into what the outcome is going to be.
I think the key point is they don't know.
They really don't know.
At some point, they don't know. The healing happens, and they don't know how or why necessarily.
Yeah, and they go by studies, and it seems to be this way. This seems to be the most, and then they tell you as if it's fact, and they may be right some percentage of time. It may even be a high percentage of time, but there's a lot of cases that they're just not that accurate. They're I wouldn't say they're guessing. I would say they're making educated hypotheses.
But at some level, it comes down to just a hypothesis. Just a guess. Well, not exactly. A guess, but an educated guess.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, you mentioned that you have, I guess, 5 core principles that you've created to think about, to be within, to live by.
Yeah. And geez, you're testing me. I haven't said these out loud for a while, Rob. But I got them. Okay. The first one is to expect synchronicity, and I actually got that one from the 12th Insight was a book, and it's signs come to you in so many ways. The old, oh, that's the 4th time I've heard that this week, or you might see animals, you might see something, or there's the old crazy conversation. These things happen all the time, and so just don't be surprised by them. Just accept them, and you know what? They will help you. I believe it's the second one is to examine your own limiting beliefs. If you ever find yourself saying something along the lines of, oh, I could never be an author, or, oh, I couldn't do that, or, oh, I wouldn't even know how to start. Well, half the time that's because we're seeing the end game and it seems like it's a long ways away. And yet, if you just start and you look back 6 months later, you'll find that you made far more progress than you ever thought you could have. So it's, whenever the limiting belief comes up, just say, is it really true? Am I really not an author? Because you're probably the only person in the room that thinks you could never do it. Most of the limiting beliefs are not true. The third one is to speak your authentic truth. And I like to think every one of those words is so important. So just in general speak, there's a lot of people will not speak at all. They'll just sit back and, oh, I'm afraid if I say something it won't be understood properly, or somebody else think something, and so they don't speak at all. So I think that word's important. Why I think that's so important is what's true for me may not be true for anybody, and even if I'm the only guy in the room that has a thought along a certain lines, that still is my truth. That's how I feel. So I don't want to speak for what I think other people want to hear. Authentic, to me, the classic one with that is like do be authentic. But if you don't know, then say you don't know. Don't start to make up an answer just for the sake of trying to fit in. And then truth, I think truth speaks for itself. It's just it is your truth. And what's my 4th one, Rob? Yeah, that was there in front of you.
It's love versus fear.
Right. So virtually all of our emotions, and many will say all of our emotions, are based on either love or fear. And they're all natural. So And I like to stress with this one, if you're having a fear-based emotion, let it have its space. If you want to scream, if you want to go out and stand at a tree and slap it and say, what are you doing? I don't understand. You just want to freak out, do it. Because the funny thing is, if you do it, you're not suppressing your emotions. You're letting them go. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, that was funny. I actually had a pretty good laugh doing that. But you can't stay frustrated with yourself. You can't stay in an unhappy space. And now you can kick over to one of your love or happiness or joy emotions. But to me, the big part there is don't suppress the feelings that, either of them. Don't suppress a love feeling. If you want to tell somebody you love them, then walk up and tell them you love them. It doesn't, go for it. So I had those 4 principles for the longest time, and it's like, I'm missing one. And I finally, it kicked in one day. It's like, get off the sidelines. You can read all the books you want. You can go to all the sessions you want, but get out there. Get out there and get involved and do something and start having conversations or start writing or whatever the case may be, and get involved. And to me, that's when the magic starts to happen, is when you're not just sitting back and waiting for things to come, but you're getting involved. Even if you don't know how, you're just taking steps, and you look back and say, wow, I've met 20 people in the last 3 months, and I never would have met them before if I hadn't have tried this. So those are the principles that I've established, and I live by those, as much as I couldn't remember number 4 there for a second. I look at those probably about once a month and say, am I really living my life that way? And I would say for the most part I am, but hey, I need to be kick myself in the butt every once in a while too.
Compassionately kick yourself in the butt.
Absolutely. Pleasantly.
So you mentioned a lot about speaking your truth, so it's really, to me, it's honoring whatever is true for you and finding a way to express that, not holding it in.
And the funny thing is, what I have found is, well, one, if you do speak your truth, you never have to cover up for what you said last time, because you're probably in the same space. But the conversations you can get into by saying, I just don't understand. It makes no sense to me that. So in the healthcare space, it's like, we have all these healthcare issues. We've got all this scientific stuff that we keep bringing to the table. You would think we'd be healthier, and we're not. Why is that? Well, even that is speaking your truth. I don't have to know all the answers, but the people that I've met along the way that I dialogue with on a very regular basis, and I think amongst us we are getting closer and closer to helping people find answers, and I believe we're getting closer and closer to helping deal with the healthcare overspending issues that are in that space. And I think you're going to start to see a lot less disease and illnesses in the coming future. That's my belief. I hope some of the listeners will join in with that one.
That's a great belief to join in too. So with that belief, the question that comes to my mind is, what's one of your recent transformative moments or recent miracles?
It's the ones that I tend to think of the most are my own physical. So when I was first diagnosed, I was told it was rheumatoid arthritis. It would be progressive. It would get worse over time, and I really needed to go on a cocktail therapy of chemotherapy drugs. So I did that, and my hair fell out, and I've gone through a few others, and I just keep asking myself, is it really the case that I have to get worse? And I've just found literally over the last, 2 or 3 weeks, I'm able to walk a lot better. I'm having an awful lot less pain. I'm off almost all of my medication. So sure, I would love to be at the end of this journey where I could tell you that there was no more pain and no more discomfort, but the progress that I have made in my physical body over the last, maybe 2 or 3 months, as I mentioned, I did the wheat belly and I've dropped about 30 pounds, so I'm sure that hasn't hurt. But what my body is responding to me is just awesome. So that's very transformative. having people that switching gears, having people that I've met just through this type of radio program, some of the things that I do on Facebook or things that I do in the community, I never would have thought I could even have a conversation with these people about healthcare, and they're looking to me saying, "You're shaking the cage, buddy. That's exactly what we need. Keep doing what you're doing." So here's a guy who didn't know the first thing about healthcare only about 2 years ago, and I'm being told that I'm making a difference. So those types of things make me, that's my form of a miracle. It's just a lot different than it was a very short time ago.
Now, do you feel like you're part of a growing community? You've mentioned your connections to these people. It must be feeling like you are.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, and it's funny because I use the phrase, I'm still stuck in a little ways that I don't know exactly what it is, so I just keep moving forward. But there's the local community where I live in. I have met with several community leaders there about trying to bring together the concept of a center, whether that's physical, whether that's virtual, but it's a place for people to go to start their own healing journey, start down the path of figuring out some of this stuff, whether they're well or whether they've just been diagnosed with something. So that's a local. I'm working with Dr. Lissa Rankin, is a colleague that some of your listeners may well have heard of, and we've got a community online called Heal Healthcare Now. So that's a community that she's set up, and I'm the community manager for that. And we've got people from all over the world that are coming and sharing their ideas about what are the things that we can do, each of us individually and as a group, to start moving forward on healing healthcare. And I've even had a filmmaker reach out to me to say, we can get out there in a bigger way by going out to communities with some public screenings of movies, doing community sessions, conversations afterwards to get people engaged. So those are really three separate exercises that seem to be all coming together for me into one, and trying to put forward, if somebody comes along and says, well, how would you build a healthy community? Well, I've got some steps. They're actually documented. They're in the process of being tested. But these are steps that any community, whether it's an online community, whether it's a physical community, whether it might even be a disease community, it might be the Arthritis Society or something like that have got steps where they can start to pull people together and start shifting just enough to say maybe these things don't have to be forever, and maybe we can start getting a little bit healthier. So I'm spending a lot of time in those spaces, and there's not a lot of leadership ahead of me. There's not a lot of people have done things like that. There's a lot of people that are trying it, and to me, there's people like yourself. There's so many people that are understanding what I'm talking about and having the same conversations. I just think if we take that step to start to pull the communities together, that's when we're really going to see the big payback. So hopefully I can even tell you. I'll come on the show in about a month or so, Rob, and I'll tell you all the updates that we've made since the last time we chatted.
That's awesome. Now, what do you think is next beyond that?
My thing, it's funny, it's my challenge, my biggest challenge in front of me is I want to make a difference, but a lot of people that are going down this path are having trouble figuring out how to turn that into a business. And that's where I'm doing a lot of research with people as far as what are the types of funding for this type of project. How do you make it sustainable? How do you bring in the businesses within your community to get them to support you? Maybe you're bringing in some of the doctors and some of the other practitioners that are all saying, yeah, that's something I really want to be part of. So that's an exercise. I've started businesses before, but in this space, it's not something that I've done before, and some of it's a little bit of pioneering, and that's where I'm putting my heart and soul right now, and meeting community leaders and philanthropists to say, is this something that you guys believe in enough, and you can get behind me and help figure out how to make this happen? So that's probably a number of people tend to have that love-hate affair with money. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I'm working through, is figuring out what my own worth is to try to bring this together to say, okay, it is a value, go out and prove it. So I'm right in the midst of that journey, and that'll probably take a little while yet.
Now, have you looked at the Kickstarter-like communities to help?
Absolutely.
Fund
What's funny, that is exactly, and Kickstarter just recently came to Canada, so I'm up in Canada, and so it wasn't an option. There were other options. We have a lot of government funding capabilities up here as well, and so really the effort has been putting together the plan behind how would you describe this in such a way that people would say, I'm in. Kickstarter is probably step number 3 for me. That may well be something that I look at within literally the next couple of weeks. I do have some meetings this week that are with some community leaders, and if I can get their buy-in, we still may do something like a Kickstarter, but if I can get the community leaders behind me, I'd like to have that in place first. And then the next logical step might be to go to government funding for some of the things. They don't want to be spending all the money on healthcare. They want to focus on prevention and wellness as well. So that would be a logical one. And then if that hasn't taken me where I need to go, then there's things like Kickstarter or some of the other crowdfunding models. Those are the 3 that are in place that I would say are October. We're not talking 6 months down the road. These are things that I'm going to be moving on in the October timeframe.
So how might listeners support movements like this, or even your movement?
It's funny. Well, that's such a good question. Because sometimes you don't know how to ask for help. But what I have found is that there's always somebody out there that has an idea that just wants to share the idea. And maybe there's something right in front of me that's staring me in the face, and somebody just sends a text along and says, have you thought of this? Or, oh, you've got to meet so-and-so, or something along that lines. To me, I wrote a blog about, 3 or 4 weeks ago. I called it Starting a Wave to Heal Healthcare. And if you think of doing a wave in a sporting event where people stand up and raise their arms, when the first person does it, nobody joins in. And then after a while, a lot of people are joining in. Well, at some point, the people that are sitting down are the ones that they don't want to sit on their hands anymore because they're starting to be singled out. I think we're so close to having people say, I just want to get behind this, I just want to help out, let's just go and support each other. And who knows where synchronicity comes in, and something lines up, and it just starts to work in the right direction. So maybe you know of people that have done more of this community building around healthcare and wellness and prevention and so on and so forth, and you have some ideas to share. I'd love to hear those. Or maybe you just like to have a conversation about healing yourself, or something along that. And anything I can do to get myself talking to people and trying to figure it out, it helps me as much as it does helping the other person. I like to think it helps the other person, but it often helps me as much or more than it helps them. So I don't know if that really answered your question, Rob, but it's I'm still looking for some answers.
I guess that you're looking for the answers is the answer to the question.
Yeah.
But do you have any tips for anyone that'd like to start out themselves to begin to help these changes, facilitate the changes?
In themselves or in their community?
In their communities.
Yeah, I think the key, what I believe more than anything is, in virtually all communities, you're going to have a group that's focused on mental health, and you're going to have another group that's focused on some kind of other condition, and you're going to have another group that's focused on youth, and you're going to have these groups, and they start to become very, very silo-like. And I think the key is to start finding a way to get them to communicate. And for me, I think it's about outreach programs. It's finding ways to politely get in people's faces, to get them to start asking questions about what does health mean and what does a healthy community mean. If you really were in a community of a smallish number of people and there was poverty in your community, somebody would reach out and help solve that, not just by giving money, but by helping that person find a job. Well, if you were in that small group, there was a mental health condition. Well, you'd reach out. Well, really, this to me is just taking it to the next step, where you're finding a way to pull these pieces together, but at a community level, and you can start to identify any of the challenges, and then you can start to work at the root cause of those challenges at a community level. So, to me, have the conversation. There's somebody in your community that wants to do it, and you probably know who they are. And if it sounds like you don't know if you know them well enough, or it's a doctor or it's a philanthropist, just go. Just go and have the conversation. And to me, that's how you're going to get it started, is by getting out of your own way and just going and trying to make a difference.
Well, thanks, Ken. We're coming to the end of the show. So you have the opportunity now to share your links again so that people can know how to find you.
Okay, so its website is www.kenjaques.com. The Twitter is @KenJaques. The Facebook is /KenJaques23. And the email is ken@kenjaques.com. And the community that I talked about is Heal Healthcare Now. If you look that up, do a Google search on that, you'll find it, and you'll be able to come on over and sign in and see who else is involved. I think there's about 2,000 community members there now, or close to that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but pretty easy guy to talk to, and love to have conversations with people. So if anybody wants to have a chat, then just send me a message.
Okay, they'll do that. Is there any words of wisdom that you'd like to leave us with?
One that I always give myself is, you're not here to play small. And anything, if you ever have any of these things that you think you can share and it might make a difference for somebody, every time you hide that, you're hiding your own value, not only from yourself, but from somebody who needs it. So don't get into a state of you're going to look back and say, I wish I'd have done that. If you think you're going to say that, then now's as good a time as any to start doing it. And just be yourself. Just enjoy yourself, appreciate yourself, and share those crazy thoughts.
Okay. Thanks for joining us tonight, Ken.
Thank you very much, Rob. It's been a real pleasure to be on your show.
It's been wonderful having you. Now, if you enjoyed this show or any of other shows here at Awakened Radio and you'd like to sponsor one of our shows, you can provide us with a 30-second audio, and your business will be sponsored at the start, at the middle, and the end of each of our shows. And again, it'll be archived to our iTunes, so you have the opportunity to have your message, spiritual or wellness, overall wellness message, heard via our show and iTunes when it's archived. So please do feel free to reach out and help us. And again, we're doing this all with no cost to you. And we also have a community of writers and artists on our Thrive magazine page, and October 10th is our deadline, and we accept well-being and spiritual being articles, art, and poetry. And again, the deadline for that is October 10th, and you can contribute whatever you like, and we share your site links and your information in the article back to you so that you can have your site be seen and known and connected to your article or art or poetry. So it's a great opportunity to get exposure for yourself. And of course, we have donate buttons at the top of all of our screens, and if you're so inclined and you've enjoyed our shows, donations are always greatly appreciated. We're here for no cost to you. If you can find it in your heart to click the button, then we appreciate whatever you're able to contribute. And today, I want to thank everyone for joining in on our open house. If you missed it, I'm sure it'll be up in the archive soon, It was a great opportunity to meet some of our hosts and some of our listeners. So please make some time to find that once it's archived on TalkShoe and iTunes, and you'll have a great experience as we all shared some of our own personal stories. So please do try to find that. And again, if you'd like to be a guest here on Simply Conversations, I'd love to hear from you. Simply click over to simplyconversations.com and click the contact button, and I'd love to hear your story, and you can share it here on the airwaves at Awakened Radio. Thanks for listening today. Please tune again next Sunday, same time, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. We'd love to hear and listen, have our listeners join in on the chat page. So thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you again next week, same time, same station. Thanks for joining us.
We're all as open, showing our inside and light so bright. We are